Molly Bloom, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
This is exactly where you need to come for credible life advice. You ask the questions, and we're going to answer them. So to be honest, I live under a rock, like seriously, in some ways, because I have 3 kids, I'm a single mom, I work around the clock, but I don't get to consume the content I want to consume. And so I was flying out to Colorado, which is this is like the synergy between it is really amazing to me. And it's actually quite moving. I found your story really moving. But I decided to take my 13-year-old little boy to Colorado for a road trip. Just the 2 of us. I needed time with him, and we were going to camp in the car because I'm scared of bears. So we had a tent, but we were like going to drive through Colorado. And so we get on the plane and we're flying out there, and I'm like flicking through the movies, and I actually generally like to work on the flight, but I had promised myself like, no, he's here with me. This is like fun. We're just going to like chill. He's going to watch a movie and I'm going to watch a movie. And I love Jessica Chastain. Yeah. And so I saw your movie and I was like, oh, what's this? And I had some younger women on my team mention it to me like months before. There was like, it just kind of came across the table, but I don't even know what it was in reference to. So it was like sort of floating out there. I didn't look up. I didn't eat on the flight. I just was riveted by the story. And I thought to myself, like, the human interest behind this and what this woman went through. I also work with very powerful men. I've had a private practice on Fifth Avenue and 30th for over a decade. I've listened to over 20,000 hours of people's life stories. And eventually what happened was my practice, as it does, moves into working with powerful men, because one guy you treat, who can trust you with his secrets, and then the next thing you know, you're working with sort of the masters of the universe types. And I'm not, because I have 2 brothers like you, I was never intimidated by them. And I'm sort of the, I wouldn't say Dr. Phil's school, but of the nature as a psychotherapist as being someone who will tell people exactly what I think, generally speaking. I don't beat around the bush very easily.
I think that's giving people a huge gift.
Yeah. It's called, in the theory is called like relational psychotherapy, but I build trust and then I'm like, put it out on the table. Yeah. I have 2 couches. I don't have a chair where I'm sitting psychoanalyzing them. I have no interest in that. Right. It's 2 human beings sitting in a room saying like, okay, what's going on? How can I like be of some assistance? Right. So there's all these layers to your story. And so right before we went live, you were telling me what it was like for you to go back to Colorado and write this book after you've essentially lost 90% of all contact with everybody, having gone from LA to Denver to live with your mom after the Fed seized all your assets. So I'm not going to explain for the audience what Molly's Game is about. If you haven't seen it, you should go see it. Aaron Sorkin adapted it from your book to the screen. It won an Oscar nomination. It won several awards. It's an incredible screenplay, and it was his directorial debut as well. Yes. So again, I was curious about that. I was going to ask you about that. Did people just drop off from you after the Fed seized your assets? Were they like, I want nothing to do with you?
Yeah, I mean, everyone. My best friend in the world, Allie Kay, who had a lot to lose by continuing to be my friend. She's, part of a high-profile family and everything. She stayed. And a couple other people, but most people left, and I take part responsibility in that, because those were the type of people I was seeking out, and that was the life that I was living. But it, it's kind of cool now, because you had this filtration process. You get to see who's your ride or die, and of course everyone comes back right when the movie comes out,
and they're like, oh, it's so good to see
so
you.
Yeah.
Wow, look what you did. Yeah. And you're like, during my darkest hours, people, was that their own fear? Like they didn't want to be associated with the story? Or, I mean, assume too that one of the hardest parts to watch, and what I thought Aaron did such a good job of adapting your story and talking about, was that it really it questioned your character. And for so long, you were running the game legally. You weren't doing anything illegal. And so this whole thing started to really question your character. And then by the grace of God, you found a lawyer who said, wait a second.
Yeah.
You're protecting people here, and you're willing to throw yourself under the bus. And there's this incredible moment in the movie where he says, where are they now, Molly? And that really struck me.
But I also, you know, I mean, and Aaron made the line sound a lot better than I did, but where he said, you know, it's not their names I'm protecting, Charlie, it's mine. But that was it, you know? What they were doing, where they were, was none of my business anymore. I was fighting for my own life. And also, even though, you know, for most of the duration of the 8 years I didn't break the law, it started to become really obvious that what I was doing was creating more harm than good. I was using my entrepreneurial instincts, my creativity, and my intelligence to exploit vice, you know, to exploit addiction. Because people that play in a game where your risk is $5 million a night or more, like I mentioned, I saw someone lose $100 million. People that play in these games over, you know, and that want to play every night, even though maybe they're so wealthy they're not going to go broke, you see their lives come undone. This is addiction. And so I started to really not like myself, but simultaneously be so addicted to feeling like I was somebody, to feeling like I had power and the money, that I couldn't leave. It was this very unhealthy relationship. You know, I from a young girl, I wanted a significant life so badly.
Yeah,
you know?
When you read your book,
Yeah.
you pepper the chapters throughout with those. I wrote down those phrases saying, "I wanted a life of adventure." I really, you have this moment where you would go to the library to study, and I don't know about you, but I remember going into the public library, and at that time there was no. You're almost my age, and there was no internet, and so we looked up remarkable people through like these encyclopedias, right? And so you'd have to do like a book report on Margaret Mead or somebody, and you remember getting them out, and they were in the encyclopedias. And I remember looking at those encyclopedias, being like, I want to be in that one day. Yeah.
And you know, on top of that, I had two brothers who were just from almost the get-go, right? That they had these very clearly defined prodigious talents, right? Jordan was, you know, a genius, and he went on to become a Harvard-educated cardiothoracic surgeon. Jeremy, 6-time world champion, 2-time Olympian that played in the NFL as well as being an Olympic skier. And they received so much attention and glory.
They're both younger than you. Yeah.
From my father. And so starting with my dinner table, I wasn't ever the smartest or the most talented person in the room, you know, but I had more of a desire for the significant life than they did. So this was like formulaically disastrous. You know?
Right. Like you had more but do you think in part that was just, this is an impossible question to answer, right? I hate these like if or like yes or no questions. But do you think in part that's because as a woman, as a young girl, you knew at the table that you were fighting against even stronger, like harder odds?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you know, as a very young girl, like that the world is not our oyster in the same way that it is our brothers.
No doubt.
And or a father's approval doesn't mean as much as somehow their son's is succeeding. If you grow up in a slightly or overtly misogynistic, chauvinistic home. Right.
You know, I think that yes, it became clear to me that the odds were not in my favor. But something else became clear to me that I think is massively empowering and helps me to get out of fear whenever I'm looking at a new challenge or whatever, which is I learned that you don't have to be the most talented or the smartest person in the room if you decide that you're going to be the most tenacious. If you decide you're just never going to give up, like knock me down 100 times, I'm just going to get back up. And I saw with my ski career, having had a spine, you know, a spine that was fused in 11 vertebrae.
When you were 12 years old, yeah.
And like everyone being like, oh, she's done with skiing, like giving up on me, not looking. And I was just like, I was the first person to practice. I was the last person to leave. I worked my butt off and made the U.S. ski team, you know? And then, so there was this really great realization from a young age that like, you don't have to be the best, you know?
You just have to be the most tenacious.
That's right. And that's available to all of us. And I've seen it outlast you know, the most talented and the smartest people in the rooms 9 times out of 10.
Is that they're just tenacious and they stay with it.
It's the person with the will, you know, and that makes themselves impervious to the failures, to just like understand that it's you know, you just ride them out and keep going back at it.
Did you ever, in the moment, I'm always interested in sort of I'm interested in the light, but also the dark times, obviously, given what I do for a living, and I'm super curious. When you were living back in Denver and you're starting to write this book and you get this modest book advance and you're out in the woods with your mom, and I'm very moved by the relationship with your mom, and I want to talk about that a little bit as well. Yeah, my mom is too. Is that, did you have moments where you thought, I'm suicidal, like I don't want to do this, like I'm out? Or I just think of those moments when people, especially when you're socially isolated and then you're physically isolated, and this whole entire experience has led to you not having the friends or the relationships that you had built over so many years' time. You're out in Denver and you're isolated. Did you ever wake up in the morning and go, like I can't, and you're getting sober? Yeah. So like all of that, all of those years of like that, when people are getting sober, for those of you who don't work with people in recovery or not in recovery, there's like this wave of like,
you're feeling everything.
Like, and
right?
And you have to go back to when you basically stop developing. Right. So which probably when you started using, you were 27, 28, or a little later?
Probably a little bit earlier in terms of like I started taking, you know, anti-anxiety pills, or I was placing a buffer between me and the world. So I wasn't maybe, you know, staying up for 5 days on, you know, on speed to run these games, but like there was something that allowed me to numb out, you know, the sharp edges of the world.
Right, which started with antidepressants.
Right, antidepressants and then, you know, anti-anxiety.
Right, leads to Xanax, which, Klonopin, all that kind of stuff.
You know, I was just always like, okay, well, my solutions were well-intended, but really unhealthy. And so that's why it's so great when you get sober that there's this 12-step program that can completely reorder you from the inside, so you find new solutions that actually make you a better person, as opposed to solutions that make you very sick. You know, it was like this really revolutionary statement when someone said to me, Molly, drugs, alcohol, men, money, they're not your problem, they're your solution, you know?
Right.
Which leads you to the sobering fact that like, oh, I've always been my problem. Right. And that's what I have to fix. I can't just keep looking for all these you know, things to get me out of right here, right now, because I can't sit with myself. Right.
Which is a wonderful realization, but also really painful.
Yeah, really
you're like,
painful.
Okay, well, some of it's in my control then. Right. But then like, then some of it's been in my control.
I've got to deal with this. Navy SEAL break myself and then rebuild.
Wait, but so again, going back to that time where you're living, and again, you probably don't get asked this much because everyone wants sort of the probably more salacious story, but I'm interested in this part of it. Is that are you like in the rooms in like a no-name town in Colorado, and everyone's going around and you're like, hi, I'm Molly. And like, where do you even start with your story?
No, I didn't.
Like you just kept.
Oh, actually, I did a couple times, never like shared, but I would tell my story to people. I told my story to some people in rehab. And they're like, okay. And then it came out in the press and they're like, oh my God, you're telling the truth. I thought you were this compulsive liar, you know? So, but, you know, I didn't stay sober. I got sober for 2 years. I wrote the book. The book was finished, and I got the rest of my advance, and I got a job in LA, and I moved back to LA.
What was the job in LA?
It was just working for this production company. But
through the connections like you had known?
Through actually a company I had met that I had pitched my story to.
Okay.
And so my plan was, okay, I'll work. You know, I'll work at this company, and I'll be able to pitch to different movie studios, you know, writers and everything.
Your own story to be translated into a screenplay?
Yeah.
Okay. So you were like already thinking like, okay, I can.
Yeah. I mean, I was like, I need a major rebranding campaign.
Yeah.
You know? And so I figured like.
What do you mean?
I mean, I needed some help. I needed a movie marketing budget.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So, you know, I was just like, I felt like I was kind of back on the path. And there were some really dark times during that year and a half, but there was also some massive amounts of freedom, because my whole life I had been terrified. So terrified to the extent I put it above my life and liberty of being found out that, you know, I was a failure, right? Of failing, of not having it together. And then it happened spectacularly in front of the world. And all of a sudden you're like, I'm free, right?
Right.
No one's expecting anything from you. You know, you've lost everything. You got nothing to lose. You're not an ego anymore, you know? And you're not in that terrified fear that you're one, you know, mistake from getting found out or from failing, right? It's just like, oh my God.
This could lead into a very wonderful and nuanced discussion about imposter syndrome for women.
Okay.
But that's for another, we're gonna have to do a follow-up show.
Yeah.
That's, I totally, there was just but was that incredible then, moving back to LA, and you had, I mean, just driving by like the Peninsula Hotel and probably bumping into people, and you're like, hey.
Yeah, no, I it was pretty crazy, but it felt like a fresh start.
Mm-hmm.
And then 10 days after I moved back to LA, I was like in this, you know, little modest apartment. I got a phone call in the middle of the night, and it had been about 2 years since I ran a game, and the voice on the other end said, "This is Mike so-and-so from the FBI. We're outside of your apartment. You need to come out, or I'm going to break down the door." And I'm like, someone's playing a trick on me. Someone's trying to smoke me out of my apartment. What's going on here? This makes no sense, you know?
Yeah.
And I went into the hallway, and I was blinded by all these lights. And when my eyes adjusted, this little hallway was stacked with 17 FBI agents, semi-automatic guns. It was just, I mean, still to this point, I don't even know how to properly process that moment. It was so crazy.
Yeah.
And they put me in handcuffs. And
well, the PTSD that gets created right in that moment, you know.
I might have skipped the PTSD. It was just too crazy.
Right,
you know?
right.
And then they were super nice. The FBI was super nice.
Yeah, because you're like in your nightgown. You had the little dog, right?
Yeah. And then this one I'm really obsessed with my dog. She's 20 years old.
Is she still alive?
She's still alive. She's in the hotel.
Oh my God. Wait, what's her name again? Lucy, that's right.
She's still alive.
Oh my God, I wish you had brought Lucy. You could have brought Lucy.
You might not wish I'd brought Lucy. She's like still a criminal. She's still like, will be like trying to bite open cabinets and steal food. But you know, I've always fed her this really healthy, like raw diet that you have to warm up a little. And
which is why she's lasted till she's 20.
Right, that's a real testament to nutrition, right?
Yeah.
And this FBI woman, I was like, before you take me to jail, can you just feed my dog? She really just needs to eat. You know what I mean? Like, and then she'll be fine. She won't even care that you're taking me, right? So this woman like cooked her food for her before they took me to jail.
And who did you call when you got to jail?
Well, they also let me use their cell phone, and I called my mom. It was like the nicest.
Was your mom like, wait, what?
She's just, you know, my mom, it's hard to shake her. I just said, Mom, I'm getting arrested by the FBI right now. Don't freak out. I need you to fly in and bail me out. And she's like, and I said, I gotta go. So yes, probably in her private moment, she freaked out, but she just got on a plane and showed up, you know, put her house up to bail me out. So she's just she's always been like, no matter what I look like.
So that was a question I had written down, which we will probably only get to 2 of them. But that was the big question I had for you was, has Mom always had your back?
No matter what I was making it look like.
Because you've had a estranged relationship with your father.
It's great now.
It's great now.
It's wonderful now.
But it was estranged for a while.
Yeah.
Right. I'm estranged from my dad. I see a lot of patients in my office who come in and they're in different stages of estrangement. And estrangement happens in families generally when the woman doesn't do what the patriarch wants.
Really?
Yes, that's the largest cause of estrangement or the brothers, right? There's like this sort of, which makes perfect sense given the world that we live in and the culture, even though we hope it's changing. And so when women say like, I'm actually not going to follow suit, I'm going to live by my own agency, that can be highly offensive to men who want control. And the reason I talk to you about this is because so often we think of girls needing their fathers when they're young. But I found the biggest loss for not having my father regularly in my life as an adult, it has been as an adult,
Really?
right? In my 20s and 30s and early 40s. Like I've needed him like big time to show up. And,
Oh, I get that.
right? Like,
No,
like,
for sure.
and so, and our moms don't generally have the same kind of financial access that our fathers have. My mom took time off to take care of us. And, you know, even though she went back to work. So it's like you're asking your mother to really like put her house, you know, mortgage her house to be able to bail you out of jail. Now, it's obviously a little bit of an extreme circumstance, but it's like what, right? We like these women communities, which will lead me into sort of what you're more interested in doing now. But your mom was the one who showed up for you.
Always. I mean, just
without question.
Without question and without judgment, you know?
She always believed in you.
Always. She was the one person when I was like, okay, here's my solution. I'm 33, I'm broke, I'm a convicted felon, and I have a really bad reputation. So I think what I'm going to do is get to Aaron Sorkin. He'll write a really great movie about it, and then I'll have some opportunity. And she's like, that sounds great. I think that'll work. And everyone else is like, you need to grow up and get a job and like,
right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, this. And if I would have just tried to get a job, I'm a convicted felon, right? And before the movie, it was like, the Madam Molly Bloom, like they painted me as like a Heidi Fleiss character.
Yes.
No judgment. Like I get, you know. I'm about women, all of them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's not what I did.
Right.
And that's not what I wanted to be known for. You know. And I'm not trying to obscure my mistakes. Right. I really am about owning that. But I built a business at 22 years old. I was running the biggest poker games in the world. I was the credit and finance arm for, you know, the biggest game on Wall Street. Like, that was hard.
So the one of the last moments in the movie is you saying, or the voiceover saying, who's going to hire me now, right? And I was like, I would. Did everybody like call you and was like, Molly? Yeah, like.
Yeah. But and that's what I wanted. Like,
you're such a badass. Like this whole felony thing, which, by the way, when people do watch the movie, or if they had, I mean, you basically you said you were guilty in order to save your own reputation, and also you didn't want to hurt so many other people. I mean, I know you play that down, but you knew a lot of secrets. Yeah, and it seemed like there was this world conspiring against you in terms of the U.S. government. It's even like scary to talk about a little bit, right? Russian mafia involved and all of these things where they really wanted you to kind of say that you were involved in a lot more that you didn't know about. Like people were just coming to your events company.
Yeah, they weren't like at the table talking about their insider trading tips or, you know.
Yeah,
like
but is that what the FBI sort of wanted from you? They wanted just more information?
They wanted me to become a confidential informant. They thought this girl's been running these exclusive underground illegal poker games with Russian mobsters, with Hollywood celebrities, with
and actually the poker games themselves aren't illegal.
They weren't until the very end
when you started taking a cut of the table.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because what does that make you, like a casino?
Yeah, so then you're profiting from gambling. Yeah.
So you have, how long did it take? What was the timeline between, because I'm sure it's like compressed in the movie. What was the timeline between meeting your incredible lawyer and pleading guilty to a felony? What was that timeline?
So from the time I met him to the time I pled?
Yeah, basically, or the time you were arrested to the time that it was.
So I got arrested in April 2013, and I pled out about a year later.
What was that year like? Like if you hadn't been through a hard enough year already.
Well, I stopped being sober.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a major question. Like how do you take one step in front of the other under that much stress, knowing that you might face prison time?
It was crazy. Yeah, it was dark.
And you're living where at that point? Back in Colorado with your mom?
I'm staying with friends, you know, because I had to spend a lot of time
here. With your lawyers. Are you in New York then at that point again?
I'm just like couch surfing, you know. I'm doing whatever I need to do. Like every day I woke up and was just like, okay, like I'm just going to put one foot in front of the other. I got to do what I got to do. But yeah, no, I fell off the wagon for sure. And it's just so interesting how I got back on.
Yeah. So tell me that, because everyone I mean, the story here is the story of resilience and tenacity and the human spirit.
Right.
Not, like, how could anyone not hire you? Like I was going, there's a few women you meet in your life that you know that if we went into battle, Serena Williams is one of them, right?
Me too. I watch her like Nike commercials before I do anything.
And if you know what happened yesterday, which you do, yeah. I mean, you know, in the press conference afterwards, what she said, which was just like, I'm just here fighting for women, and if men had acted out that way, they wouldn't have been punished the way I have been. So there's a few people I've been thinking about where like you'd want to go into battle with, and you're one of them.
Well, thank you. That's a huge honor.
Yeah, well, of course, because you've suffered and you've made it through, and. So how did you get back on after?
Okay, so this is my favorite thing to talk about because it's a real testament to this myth that I have chased, and I think people chase their whole life. So, all right, so I fell off the wagon again, and I said to myself, when I put my life back together, everything's gonna be okay again. I'm gonna feel okay. When the truth is like I never really felt okay, right? Mm-hmm. Like you get successful, it normalizes. You adapt to it, and then you're left with the catastrophe of your personality, or right of what's inside.
Right. This is why achievers are never happy. Right. It's like because you achieve, and then you're like, oh God, this didn't make me feel any better.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're expecting it to.
Which is why I have so many masters of the universe who've sat in my office who've been like, why aren't I happy? I'm worth $1 million.
Right. Know? And then that's why also I had so many masters of the universe sitting at a poker game. Mm-hmm. They just wanted to get out of right here, right now, because they couldn't stand it. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so. This was a year and a half ago. The movie had just been finished. I hadn't seen it yet, but everyone said it was, Molly, this is good. You know, it's real good. Mm-hmm. I had just received a considerable bank wire from the studio. Everyone was starting to come back, you know, want to be my friend again. Opportunities were pouring in. And I sat there and I waited for the fulfillment, for the peace, for the suffering to stop, for the emptiness to go away, and it didn't. And it was like in that moment, I knew for sure. It took me a long time to, you know, I'm a slow learner.
Yeah.
But I knew for sure that my strategy to live a fulfilled, happy, meaningful life had been wrong, always, and that I had to really go inside, you know. And so I moved back home to Colorado. I got real sober, right? I got
like really.
You know, I got this sponsor who has 25 years of sobriety. She's this Puerto Rican woman from the Bronx. She's like half Tony Montana, half Mother Teresa. She gets like super gangster, but like is so spiritual. Yeah. She was like, you know, anytime I was in self-pity, she goes, I'm telling you, stop feeling, you know, stop feeling sorry for yourself, go do something for someone else, right? She taught me about being present to the people that I had wronged, my family.
Making
amends. Taking a fearless moral inventory, looking at myself, right? Yeah. Really looking at myself, looking at that column where what's my part in it? All these people that have hurt me. And it started to resonate that like my problems are all of my own making, you know? And it's this lack of feeling connected, this lack of connection, this lack of self-esteem. So she taught me about self-esteem, which is doing small esteemable acts and starting to like yourself, right? Not like having the right clothes, you know, just not pursuing things externally, but like moving the center of gravity within. And I started meditating, which has changed my life.
It's so amazing. I have to turn this down just a little bit. It's too loud. It's too loud in the ears here. Oh, okay, I know. Is that okay for you?
Yeah,
is it too
fine.
loud? It's
no,
okay.
It's fine.
So it's amazing that you just said that, because every person that I've interviewed on this show spontaneously tells me that they meditate and it's changed their life.
It's changed my life.
See, maybe so the audience doesn't know this, but when Molly first came in, I was joking with her because I said, how do you, like, all these people in sobriety have this massive acceleration of positive change, I feel like, after they have been sober, right? And I'm like, for those of us who've never had an alcohol problem or been around, but have been around people who are in recovery or in treatment, I'm always like, wait, do I have to get like a bad heroin addiction? And then I have like this accelerated positive change because I'm like slugging it away every hour, choosing the right next thing, you know? And so we were talking about that, and maybe the key there is the meditation
I think piece. It is.
Like and I've done shows on like it's connecting to this higher power and frequency, and I believe in sort of all the metaphysical stuff behind it.
No, there's this very compelling metaphysical piece. There's also compelling science.
Very compelling science.
That a brain looks different. That's
right? And then
And
we're all energy and all frequencies,
right.
and you're like existing on a different frequency when you meditate.
Right.
And,
So if you feel like you are your own worst enemy in terms of the fiction you create in your head, if you feel like self-doubt and fear and stress about what other people are thinking or saying, if you feel like that fiction, that constant cycle that goes on in your head stands in your way, then meditation will revolutionize you. You know, I think, you know, even for people who aren't interested in sort of like getting peace of mind, I think meditation makes you dangerous. I am 10 times the negotiator. I am 10 times the businesswoman. I am 10 times the human being. Like, that's what's interesting to me.
Why do you think?
Because it allows you to live in this moment. You know, I've always been running from myself. When I first started meditating, I had to start with 30 seconds. That's the max time I could spend in my head. The next day, and I know from sports or from school that you establish the habit, right? And you grow it. So, and I just kept building on my time. And, you know, I sit down for 20 minutes a day, sometimes twice a day. And it has changed my life because I can sit there and I can watch that thought dialogue go, and I don't have to do anything about it. I don't have to change it. I don't connect to it. So I walk into a room now with people. My soul's not for sale because I know the fallacy that money, power, all that stuff is going to
doesn't do anything.
And B, I'm in this moment, right?
That's the freedom.
That's the freedom.
Is knowing that things, when you have, like, when you're so secure in sort of like what brings you happiness, and it's not those external things, it's just internal, it's such a joy.
It is. And look, I'll always be ambitious and I'll always have appreciation for nice things, but they don't own me anymore.
No. And you don't, and I think there's like an element when you cross that stage, an element of ambivalence about it as well.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, that's a nice bag,
right.
but like, okay, it's frosting on the cake.
Right. I had everything, I lost everything I had, you know what I mean? Like, whatever. It didn't really radically change how I felt inside. In fact, like, when I was like all about the name, you know, the Bentleys and the Chanels and everything, like, it was kind of a yucky place to be because, like, that's how I was attracting people to me. And then those people that you attract, you're like, I don't even really like you, you know? So I think meditation is an insane tool. And I think it will change everything in your life.
Yeah.
My intuition is sharper, you know, you're smarter because you don't have that noise. You don't have the peanut gallery. You know, it doesn't, you know.
So true. And it calms the parasympathetic nervous system.
Totally.
Right. So your reaction time is slower to people. Like, you process what they're saying. I know.
Yes.
You're not as reactive.
No, and
you make decisions from like this really
smart,
beautiful place.
Totally. And I
so were you all that work happened when you were living back in Colorado?
Yeah, the last 18 months. You know, I basically...
That was the last 18 months just now of your life.
Yeah, and so, like, I would go
Did you live in Denver? Did you live with your mom again?
No, I lived in Denver.
You moved to Denver.
I got my own apartment, my own bank account.
Right. Did you get a job during those 18 months? Well, you've been on press tour the whole time,
I was
right?
committed
the movie
to being
came out.
Yeah. So, like, I'm going, you know, I'm watching the movie for the first time with my whole family and 2,000 people at the
What
trial.
was that like?
God, I was in so much gratitude. And also, it was this incredible moment where I didn't know what to expect. I was terrified, you know? But I'm sitting there with my whole family, and I'm sitting there with 2,000 people, and all of a sudden the movie starts, and the audience is so engaged, and they're laughing at the funny parts, they're crying at the emotional parts, they're cheering when I don't have to go to jail, and it was the connection, you know? I felt connected
to people.
That
your story really deeply resonated with people.
It was...
You didn't expect that.
No.
I'm sure. I know.
No.
Because A, not every movie does.
Right.
But B, there is something so compelling about you as a character and what you've been through.
Aaron wrote a great, beautiful movie. He really did.
Well, and I think it's brave that somebody as young as you, right? You just, is it okay if I tell people?
Yeah, of
You're 40 years old,
Yeah.
which I love. I'm 42. I loved being 40.
I love it.
I thought it was like sexy and hot and like
you're
accomplished and awesome. I just loved it.
I agree, and I love that you say that because people are like, oh, I won't say your age, and I'm like, God, I have earned this.
I can tell you, there is with everything, like everything, as you know, there's a set of like diminishing returns.
Right. I'm just like,
as I approach like my mid 40s, I'm like, it's not as hot as 40. Like 40 is just such a sweet
Well,
spot.
I just think as women we get better. We get smarter, and then there's like this beginning of your spiritual life too.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
That's and also because you stop being sort of seen all the time or having to like move within the space of being a sexual object.
Right.
So then you can like start actually focusing on more meaningful, deeper things.
I think that it's an amazing time. I think people.
But you've lived.
Right.
Like you had the balls, for lack of a better word, to really live for 2 decades.
Yeah.
And I like, my hat is off to you because
Thank
you lived more in a few days than people will in a very long time in their lives.
Well, I think that I think it's so awesome now that I get to like go out into the world and spread messages of like hope to people that have maybe messed everything up, or spread or like give inspiration to people who need to start.
Yeah.
Like that's what's this great thing that's coming from this. And for me, because I was in those places where not knowing where to start and not knowing how to, I so desperately wanted practical application and solution, right? And I would watch these videos and everyone would say these like platitudes or these coffee mug quotes, and I'm just like, but how do I do that? You know?
Yeah.
So knowing that and having that experience has catalyzed me to like get really specific with people. Like, this is how you do it.
Yeah.
You know?
What were like 3 things? Like obviously for me, when people come in, I say to them, I'm not going to work with you unless you start meditating.
Yes.
Like that's number 1.
Oh, number 1.
Yeah.
Are
there a couple other things that you would say?
I think making a commitment to be of service on a regular basis. And I tell people it's like, not like you have to go volunteer every day, right? If you know someone in your life is suffering, call them and make the call about them. Just doing something like that every day builds a self-esteem. And I think it really works. I learned that from a 12-step program, and it works.
Yeah,
I've seen people who have been running and gunning and lying and cheating and stealing start to put themselves back together in this way, and the light comes on and they start to like themselves. And I think, look, we have to fight for ourselves in this world, you know? And you're not going to fight for yourself if you don't think you're a good person. So I think being of service, making that commitment, is a way to fill yourself up and to also start to like yourself more.
To love.
Yeah, to love.
Literally, it's to love.
Right.
It's just to love people.
Right.
To love something other than yourself or your own goals.
And then I think the last one is contrary action. So like if you're in fear, do it anyway, right? Courage is not the absence of fear. I'm scared all the time. Do it anyway, and start small. Start wearing down those walls of resistance. Small, you know, do a couple things you're afraid of. You'll wear it down, and you start to get empowered. If you're feeling resistant to the work that you want to do, like to you know, whether it's sports
trying something new, or a new job, whatever
or
it is.
like putting in the time, right?
Yeah,
do it anyway.
It's interesting you say that. I did an interview with a guy named Larry Yatch, who's a former Navy SEAL. And he said, do you know the best way to conquer fear? And I'm looking at him like, oh my God, here I've spent decades in the human mind and like sort of waiting around in the human soul.
Right.
And I couldn't really answer the question. I was like, I
No,
don't know, like
hard.
really, like, without giving a platitude.
Yeah.
And he said, it's literally exactly what you said. Just little steps at a time where you create a safe enough space where you try something new and then you're like, oh, okay, I got this. Like I can go on and I can keep doing it. But that's also, there's something to be said about your ability to have self-esteem in the face of failure.
Yeah.
Right? Like you were born with an ability to say like, okay, I always tell people, they're like, how do you do this? You seem so brave. And I'm like, oh, I fail every day.
Yeah, every day.
I'm just kind of like,
I'm a professional failure.
I'm just like really used to it. I'm just like, oh, okay, they didn't call back, or like they totally rejected me, or that book deal fell through, and like, okay, like maybe next year it won't, like maybe it will, like I don't know what else to do with my time, honestly, I don't know. Yeah, that's so interesting.
And I mean, like when I finally got to Aaron Sorkin, because I sought him out.
I have one quick question for you, for all the women out there. One, I won't name him, but I had a really powerful man in my office one day, and I said to him, and unfortunately I haven't had as many powerful women. Right?
I feel the same way.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. And part of that is because men still own all of that money and power, a lot of it in our society. And I said, what's the key to your success? And he said, and he was totally self-made, and he said, I was never afraid to pick up the phone. Nobody wants to pick up the phone, but just pick up the phone. They send emails or like, it's just, was that how you did it? Like did you pick up the phone and just start calling people and say like, I need to meet you for coffee?
Yeah, I just said, I would just, I called the agencies. I called...
Like the front desk at like William Morris, and you were like, hey, I need to talk to somebody.
Yeah, I've got a book. And I didn't want an agent.
So you just started dialing for dollars.
Yeah.
Like cold calling.
And then also activating the, any network I still had.
Right.
And then I had a friend in the entertainment business, Leopoldo, who made a lot of calls for me. But yeah, I was just like, Aaron Sorkin to me made a lot of sense because I really loved him as a writer. I think he has a lot of humanity. And I also know that as a gambler, if I run odds on him, he's a really safe bet for executing a successful movie. I mean, if you look at his track record, right?
Right. He's not going to like do something with it and then becoming like a total disaster.
Yeah. No, I mean, he delivers.
Yeah.
Right. So I was like, I was trying to get to him and finally, and people would say things to me like, I don't think Sorkin's going to write the Poker Princess movie, and I'd be like, so is that a no? Like I didn't care.
You're like, oh, okay.
Okay, well
thanks
that's
for
not
your opinion.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm just asking for a meeting, not an opinion. But then when I finally got to him and I pitched him, and his people were like, you have no more than 60 minutes, and like
to talk to him.
And
were you nervous?
Yeah, terrified.
Yeah.
And I walked in and I like blacked out and told the story, And he like leaned back in his chair and looked at me and he's like, I've never met someone so down on their luck and so full of themselves. And I was like, well, I'm in survival mode. And then, he wanted to write the movie and here we are. So
were your publishers shocked when you told them that you got arrested? Because you had already published the book.
Yes.
Did you like call your editor?
Yeah.
Who published your book originally?
HarperCollins. Carrie Thornton did it.
So you called Carrie and was like, hey.
I'm like, you know what?
There's been like a different, like we have to do it.
Yeah. I'm like, I need to do
prologue.
a rewrite. It's kind of a different story now. Here's the good news and bad news. Bad news, I've been federally indicted. Good news, more exciting story. You know?
Right. Just two last questions before we stop. Do you, in the face of the Me Too movement and everything that's changed over the last 12 months, and how much, I mean, if anybody wants sort of so many things that you said about men and power and access and how for them the poker game was really about creating an adrenaline rush because they haven't, I think a lot of them haven't turned inward yet.
Totally.
Right. They're not meditating and sitting around. And I think that's changing. I think as the world is changing, Me Too came out and everything that's going on in terms of our president of the United States, people are starting to say like, all this money and all this stuff isn't going to bring me happiness, which we already know.
Right.
But what do you foresee for women now in the future? I mean, you are I would consider you a feminist on the forefront of all of this.
I mean, I've always considered myself a feminist, but my brand of feminism is not supremacy, right? It's doing it differently. I think we have a really great opportunity right now. This is an opportunity I have been waiting for my whole life. I have wanted my whole life, but I really want us to appreciate the responsibility that we're tasked with to change the world, and to do power differently, to have compassionate power, and to pursue justice. The Me Too movement is really encouraging because we're seeing the bravery, right? But we're also seeing real consequences from institutions, corporations,
where it's crumbling.
But I am also committed, as we all should be, to due process, right? So I think it's massively exciting, and I think that there's a lot of responsibility here to do it differently, and I think we will.
And what about? So I've always been of the idea that when we can't join the men's club, right? Which you created the men's club. We have to create the women's club, right? So if we give women access to, and so much of that for me, when I'm asked at parties, like what's going to change? What's going to change for us and how are we going to accelerate change? It's all about giving women money. Because money gives us power and gives us access.
And we're good with it.
And not only that, we can make more of it, yes, obviously, but then we can create political change.
Agreed.
So
I think also, I think that there's a way, and I think capital is a huge one, but I think it's also empowering women to know that we have the two assets at our disposal right now that will secure, our dominion. We own the vote and we own the dollar. So if we can,
what do you mean by that?
We're the consumers, and we're the majority of, and we're the majority of the voters.
I know.
So we have these two.
We do.
At our disposal already. We just need to figure out how to come together, and not consume companies that, commit
Profit.
egregious
Yes.
human rights violations, or that don't pay women equally, or that employ child slave labor. And we don't vote for politicians who don't have our back, who are going to appoint, people to the Supreme Court that are going to control our bodies. Like, we already have it at our disposal. To me, it's about creating a really strong collective community around it. And I think a great place to start is, like, if you're going to be a feminist, if you're going to be a woman, be about women, all of them. Even if you don't like the way they dress, the way they do their makeup, what they're, be about women, because it's almost in direct opposition to our biology sometimes, and
to be about women.
And we got to overcome that. And then I think creating community around it and mobilizing the dollar and the vote is kind of,
Well, that, and for what I want to see in terms of what I'd love to do in the next 5 to 10 years of my life is just create capital for women to tap into.
That would be huge.
Because they can start companies, and then we can we have choice.
Right.
We can support women-owned businesses.
Right.
We can have women make more money, employ more money, more women, pay them. Yeah. That's where that kind of access to capital, which is what's so interesting about is access to capital. And if I sit with really powerful men, on the down low, they'll say, yeah, we don't give money to women, women-owned businesses. And they give money to each other on the golf courses and during poker games. And, when they're all sort of sitting around, they can dole out a check. Well, if I went to my friends for money, they'd probably have to ask a lot of their husbands if it was okay, because they don't make their own money because they're mothers. Right? And so it's a totally different structure and mindset.
I agree with you.
And women can do so much with so little. What you did at times was so little. I mean, talk about betting the house. Right? So what's on the future what's on the horizon for you in the next year? Is there a company sort of starting to brew inside of you again? You're an entrepreneur. I know that you're starting to collect sort of a community of women around you. Thank God, because we need leaders like you.
Thank you.
I mean, it's incredible. I could be sitting here with somebody would you ever go into politics?
I will go wherever I feel like I can have an impact about the things that I care about.
I love that.
Like, it's so awesome to be free of this push to amass a huge net worth and have power. Like, I know it doesn't work. So this time around, I get to just do things that I feel passionate about, that fill me up, that I care about. And I care about empowering women.
So that's on the horizon.
Yeah.
In some form or another.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out right now. Is how I use my access, my skill set, my platform to create something scalable that moves the needle.
Right. Right. Thank you so much for being on the show today. It was so great, Molly, meeting you.
It was amazing.
Such an honor. Honestly,
it's
such
an honor for me.
And you're such a example to the recovery community as well.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, I for the rest of my life, I will be indebted to
recovery.
Oh my God.
Yeah. There was I always joke with people because I always think there needs to be a recovery for people who don't, and there's programs that are starting to sprout up.
I agree with you.
Right.
I totally
where
agree with
it doesn't have to be a addiction based community. One Recovery in LA is one of them. A friend of mine is starting to run. Yeah. And we want to bring it onto the East Coast because I need a meeting.
I know.
I need a meeting. And it doesn't necessarily have to be Al-Anon or AA, but I need a meeting.
Agreed. And the 12 steps, the only step that's about drugs or alcohol is one.
Right.
And you can put anything in there, like blank has made my life unmanageable and I feel powerless over it. The rest of it is about clearing it out.
Social media has made my life totally unmanageable.
Right. Anything. Coffee has made my life
unmanageable. My kids have made my life totally unmanageable.
Yes, you got to 12-step those kids.
Thanks, Molly.
Yeah, thank you.